From the National Newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm Don Mitchell. U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped up his threat to hit Iran's critical infrastructure if the country's government doesn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz by his Monday deadline. Associated Press correspondent Julie Walker says amid Trump's fiery new threat, Iran has fired back with words of its own.
President Trump in an expletive-filled post threatening to escalate strikes on Iran if it doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz by his Tuesday deadline. This follows the daring rescue of an aviator whose plane was downed by Iran. Trump on Sunday promising strikes on the country's power plants and bridges. Iran showing no signs of backing down. Minister of Cultural Affairs and Tourism Saeed Reza Salehi Amiri. He says Trump is an unstable, delusional figure. Iranian society generally does not pay attention to his statements as it believes he lacks personal, behavioral, and verbal balance and consistently shifts between contradictory positions. Meanwhile, the Iran war continues. Oil tankers stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Diplomatic efforts ongoing, with countries like Oman and Pakistan trying to mediate. The war now in its sixth week. I'm Julie Walker.
Meanwhile, closer to home, universities across Canada are offering some international students extra supports, such as exam deferrals and holds on tuition, as the war continues in the Middle East.
An Iranian international student and president of the University of Toronto Graduate Students Union is a PhD candidate in biomedical engineering. He says right now, Iranian students in Canada cannot contact their families, cannot transfer money, and in many cases have no way of knowing whether their loved ones are safe. He notes that the extraordinary level of disruption demands more than deadline flexibility. Data from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada shows more than 23,000 study permit holders from Iran and about 1,800 from Lebanon are in Canada as of the end of 2024. Naira Ahmed, The Canadian Press.
Elsewhere, tensions between the Nova Scotia government and First Nations leaders flared up over the weekend after Premier Tim Houston blasted demonstrators for blocking highways. Houston suggesting in a social media post last night that it undermines public safety, respect for law enforcement, and the rule of law itself. It comes after protesters set up multiple blockades in reaction to an RCMP raid on an unregulated Indigenous cannabis shop in Cape Breton. The Bolodeg First Nation said in its own statement that the action was a powerful demonstration of unity and solidarity across their nation. And the Artemis Q astronauts are now more than halfway to the moon and will reach their destination tomorrow, performing a lunar flyby and then coming straight back home. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen joined Americans Reed Wiseman and Christina Koch in a live interview and answer session from aboard NASA's Orion spacecraft earlier with Canadian Kids Today.
And if we ever had to do it, we definitely want to plan. And so we talked about it on Earth, and one of our tests this week was actually to try those techniques out.
Artemis Q is the first crewed mission to the moon since the Apollo flights of the 1960s and 70s. This is the Canadian Press. In sports and Major League Baseball, rough day for Toronto Blue Jays lefty Eric Lauer, who only went 2 innings, giving up 2 runs on 3 hits to the Chicago White Sox. It was all the Sox needed in a 3-0 win in the series finale in Chicago. The news got worse for the Jays as third baseman Addison Barger left the game with an injury. In other action, Miguel Amaya hit an RBI single in the 8th inning, and 4 Cubs pitchers combined for a 1-hitter in a 1-0 victory over the Cleveland Guardians in the first game of a doubleheader. In the NHL, the Montreal Canadiens are going to the postseason once again. The Habs clinched a spot in the Stanley Cup playoffs after the Detroit Red Wings fell to the Minnesota Wild 5-4. Patrick Waugh has been fired as coach of the New York Islanders in yet another late-season change in the league. The Isles are in a spring tailspin, and it's put their playoff chances in jeopardy. First-year general manager Matthew Darch pulling the plug on Waugh and replacing him with Peter DeBoer with 4 games left. From the Canadian Press, I'm Don Mitchell.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.